States and Minorities Appendices by Babasaheb Ambedkar. Appendix 1 Explanatory Notes. Article 2, Section 3. Clause 1. In the Government of India Acts of 1919 and 1935, the model that was adopted for framing the structure of the executive in the provinces and in the centre was of the British type and what is called by constitutional lawyers parliamentary executive as opposed to the American type of executive, which is contradiction of the British type, is called non-parliamentary executive. The question is whether the pattern for the executive adopted in the two acts should be retained or whether it should be abandoned, and if so, what model should be adopted in its place. Before giving final opinion on this issue, it would be desirable to set out the special features of the British type of the executive and the consequences that are likely to follow if it was applied to India. The following may be taken to be the special features of British or the parliamentary executive. 1. It gives a party which has secured a majority in the legislature the right to form a government. 2. It gives the majority party the right to exclude from government persons who do not belong to the party. 3. The government so formed continues in office only so long as it can command a majority in the legislature. If it ceases to command a majority, it is bound to resign either in favor of another government formed out of the existing legislature or in favor of a new government formed out of a newly elected legislature. As to the consequences that would follow if the British system was applied to the Indian situation, this can be summed up in the following proposition. 1. The British system of government by a cabinet of the majority party on the premise that the majority is a political majority. In India, the majority is a communal one. No matter what social and political program it may have, the majority will retain its character of being communal. Nothing can alter this fact. Given this fact, it is clear that if the British system was copied, it would result in permanently vesting executive power in a communal majority. 2. The British system of government imposes no obligation upon the majority party to include in its cabinet the representatives of minority parties. If applied to India, the consequences will be obvious. It would make the majority community a governing class and the majority minority community a subject race. It would mean that a communal majority will be free to run the administration according to its own ideas for what is good for the minorities. Such a state of affairs could not be called democracy. It will have to be called imperialism. In the light of these consequences, it is obvious that the introduction of British type of the executive will be full of menace to the life, liberty and pursuit of happiness of the minorities in general and of the untouchables in particular. The problems of the untouchables is a formidable one for the untouchables to face. The untouchables are surrounded by a vast mass of Hindu population which is hostile to them and which is not ashamed of committing any inequity or atrocity against them. For a redress of these wrongs, which are matters of daily occurrence, the untouchables have to call in the aid of the administration. What is the character and composition of this administration? To be brief, the administration in India is completely in the hands of the Hindus. It is their monopoly. From top to bottom, it is controlled by them. There is no department which is not dominated by them. They dominate the police, the magistracy, and the revenue services, indeed, any and every branch of the administration. The next point to remember is that the Hindus in the administration have the same positive, antisocial, and inimical aptitude to the untouchables which the Hindus outside the administration have. Their one aim is to discriminate against the untouchables and to deny and deprive them not only of the benefits of law but also of the protection of the law against tyranny and oppression. The result is that the untouchables are placed between the Hindu population and the Hindu-ridden administration, the one committing wrong against them and the other protecting the wrongdoer instead of helping the victims. Against this background, what can Swaraj mean to the untouchables? It can only mean one thing, namely that while today it is only the administration that it is in the hands of the Hindu, under Swaraj, the legislature and the executive will also be in the hands of the Hindu. It goes without saying that such a Swaraj would aggravate the sufferings of the untouchables. For, in addition to an hostile administration, there will be an indifferent legislature and a callous executive. The result will be that the administration, unbridled in venom and in harshness, uncontrolled by the legislature and the executive, may pursue its policy of inequity towards the untouchables without any curb. To put it differently, under Swaraj, the untouchables will have no way of escape from the destiny of degradation which Hindus and Hinduism have fixed for them. These are special consideration against the introduction of the British system of executive, which have their origin in the interests of the minorities and the scheduled castes. But there is one general consideration which can be urged against the introduction of the British cabinet system in India. The British cabinet system has undoubtedly given the British people a very stable system of government. Question is, will it produce a stable government in India? The chances are very slender. In view of the clashes of castes and creeds, there is bound to be a plethora of parties and groups in the legislature in India. If this happens, it is possible, nay, certain, that underlies system of parliamentary executive like the one that prevails in England, under which the executive is bound to resign upon an adverse vote in the legislature, India may suffer from instability of the executive. For it is the easiest thing for groups to align and realign themselves at frequent intervals and for petty purposes and bring about the downfall of government. The present solidarity of what are called the majority parties cannot be expected to continue. Indeed, as soon as the problem of the British in India is solved, the cement that holds these parties together will fail away. Constant overthrow of government is nothing short of anarchy. The present constitution has in it section 93, which provides a remedy against it. But section 93 would be out of place in the constitution of a free India. Some substitute must therefore be found for section 93. Taking all these considerations together, there is no doubt that the British type of the executive is entirely unsuited to India. The form of the executive proposed in the clause is intended to serve the following purposes. 1. To prevent the majority from forming a government without giving any opportunity to the minorities to have a say in the matter. 2. To prevent the majority from having exclusive control over administration and thereby make the tyranny of the minority by the majority possible. 3. To prevent the exclusion by the majority party in the executive representatives of the minorities who have no confidence of them. 4. To provide a stable executive necessary for good and efficient administration. The clause takes the American form of executive as a model and adapts it to the Indian condition, especially to the requirements of minorities. The form of the executive suggested in the proposal cannot be objected to on the grounds that it is against the principle of responsible government. Indians who are used to the English form of executive forget that this is not the only form of democracy and responsible government. The American form of executive is an equally good type of democratic and responsible form of government. There is also nothing objectionable in the proposal that a person should not be qualified to become a minister merely because he is elected to the legislature. The principle that a member of the legislature before he is made a minister should be chosen by his constituents was fully recognized by the British Constitution for over 100 years. A member of parliament who was appointed a minister had to submit himself for election before taking up his appointment. It was only lately given up. There ought therefore to be no objection to it on the grounds that the proposals are not compatible with responsible government. The actual proposal is an improved edition of the American form of government for the reason that under it, members of the executive can sit in the legislature and have a right to speak and answer questions. Clause 2. The proposal cannot be controversial. The best remedy against tyranny and oppression by a majority against a minority is inquiry, publicity, and discussion. This is what the safeguard provides for. A similar proposal was also recommended by the Sapru Committee. Clause 3. Social boycott is always held over the heads of the untouchables by the caste Hindus as a sword of Damocles. Only the untouchables know what a terrible weapon it is in the hands of the Hindu. Its effects and forms are well described in the report made by the committee appointed by the government of Bombay in 1928 to investigate the grievances of the depressed classes, and from which the following extracts are made. It illuminates the situation in a manner so simple that everybody can understand what tyranny the Hindus are able to practice upon the untouchables. The committee said, although we have recommended various remedies to secure to the depressed classes their rights to all public utilities, we fear that there will be difficulties in the way of their exercising them for a long time to come. The first difficulty is the fear of open violence against them by the orthodox classes. It must be noted that depressed classes form a small minority in every village, opposed to which is a great majority of the orthodox who are bent on protecting their interests and dignity from any supposed invasion by the depressed classes at any cost. The danger of prosecution by the police has put a limitation upon the use of violence by the orthodox classes, and consequently, such cases are rare. The second difficulty arises from the economic position in which the depressed classes are found today. The depressed classes have no economic independence, and in most parts of the presidency, such some cultivate the lands of the orthodox classes as their tenants at will. Others live on their earnings as farm laborers employed by the orthodox classes, and the rest subsist on the food or grain given to them by the orthodox classes in lieu of service rendered to them as village servants. We have heard of numerous instances where the orthodox classes have used their economic power as a weapon against the depressed classes in their villages, when the latter have dared to exercise their rights, and have evicted them from their land, and stopped their employment and discontinued their remuneration as village servants. This boycott is often planned on such an extensive scale as to include the prevention of the depressed classes from using the commonly used paths and the stoppage of sale of the necessaries of life by the village banya. According to the evidence, sometimes small causes suffice for the proclamation of a social boycott against the depressed classes. Frequently, it follows on the exercise by the depressed classes of their right to use the common well. But cases have been by no mean rare where a stringent boycott has been proclaimed simply because a depressed class man has put on the sacred thread, has bought a piece of land, has put on good clothes or ornaments, or has carried a marriage procession with a bridegroom on the horse through the public street. This was said in 1928. Lest it should be regarded as a phase which has now ended, I reproduce below a copy of a petition by the untouchables of the village Kheri Jisore in the Punjab, addressed to the Deputy Commissioner of the Rohtak district in February 1947, and a copy of which was sent to me. It reads as follows: from the Scheduled Caste People, Village Kheri Jisore, Tehsil and District Rohtak, to the Deputy Commissioner, Rohtak District, Rohtak. Sir, we, the following scheduled castes of the village Kheri Jisore, beg to invite your kind attention to the hard plight we are put to due to the undue pressure and merciless treatment by the caste Hindu Jats of this village. It was about 4 months back that the Jats of the village assembled in the Chopad and told us to work in the fields on a wage in kind of one bundle of crops, containing only about one seer of grains per day per man, instead of food at both times, and a load of crops, and annas 8 in addition, which we used to get before any above announcement was made. As it was too little and insufficient to meet both ends, we refused to go to work. At this, they were enraged and declared a social boycott on us. They made a rule that our cattle would not be allowed to graze in the jungle unless we would agree to pay a tax not leviable under the government for the animals, which they call us pucci. They even do not allow our cattle to drink water in the village pool and have prevented the sweepers from cleaning the streets where we live, so that heaps of dust and dirt are lying there which may cause some disease if left unattended. We are forced to lead a shameful life, and they are always ready to beat us and to tear us down by behaving indecently towards our wives, sisters, and daughters. We are experiencing a lot of trouble of the worst type. While going to the school, the children were even beaten severely and in a merciless manner. We submitted an application detailing the above facts to yourself, but we are sorry that no action has been taken as of yet. It is also for your kind consideration that the Inspector of Police and Tehsildar of Rohtak, whom we approached in this connection, made a careless investigation, and in our opinion, no attention was paid to redress the difficulties of the poor and innocent persons. We therefore request your good self to consider over the matter and make some arrangements to stop the merciless treatment and threats which the charts give us in different ways. We have no other reproach except to knock at your kind door and hope your honor will take immediate steps to enable us to lead an honorable and peaceful life, which is humanity's birthright. We beg to remain, sir, your most obedient servants, scheduled caste people of village Kheri Jisor, Tehsil and district Rohtak. Thumb impressions. Copy forwarded to the Honorable Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Western Court, New Delhi. Received on 1st February 1947. This shows that what was true in 1928 is true even today. What is true of Bombay is true of the whole of India. For evidence of the general use of boycott by the Hindus against the untouchables, one has only to refer to the events that occurred all over India in the last elections to the provincial legislatures. Only when boycott is made criminal will the untouchables be free from being the slaves of the Hindus. The weapon of boycott is nowadays used against other communities besides the scheduled castes. It is therefore in the interests of all minor communities to have this protection. The provisions relating to boycott are taken bodily from the Burma Anti-Boycott Act 1922. Clause 4. Such a provision already exists in Section 150 of the Government of India Act 1935. The end.